The incidence of tax refers to the final resting place of a tax burden, who ultimately pays the tax, as opposed to the statutory incidence, who legally writes the check to the government. Public economics uses different frameworks to analyze incidence, primarily distinguishing between the narrow focus of partial equilibrium, pay, and the broad interconnectedness of general equilibrium, GE. 1. Partial equilibrium, pay, framework. The pay framework analyzes the incidence of a tax within a single market, the taxed good or service, and assumes that the tax has no significant ripple effects on other markets, factor prices, or overall national income. Intuitive focus, supply and demand curves. In pay, tax incidence is determined by the relative elasticities of supply and demand in that specific market. Mechanism. When a government imposes a tax, say, an excise tax on cigarettes, the supply curve shifts up, or the demand curve shifts down. The tax burden is the wedge created between the price paid by consumers, PC, and the price received by producers, PP. Intuition of elasticity. Inelastic side pays more, the side of the market, buyers or sellers, that is less responsive to price changes, more inelastic, bears the larger share of the burden. Elasticity is the escape mechanism. The more elastic side can escape the tax by readily adjusting its behavior. If demand is inelastic, buyers have few alternatives, e.g., addicts, buyers must pay the higher price to continue consuming. The burden is shifted to consumers. If supply is inelastic, producers cannot easily stop production or switch to other goods, e.g., specific land use, sellers must accept a lower net price. The burden is shifted to producers. Conclusion, pay. The pay framework is ideal for analyzing taxes on goods that constitute a small part of the overall economy, e.g., specific sin taxes. It provides a clean, clear visual of how supply and demand forces distribute the tax wedge. 2. General Equilibrium, GE, framework. The GE framework analyzes tax incidence by recognizing that a tax imposed on one good or factor affects all interconnected markets, including factor markets, labor and capital, and the prices of other goods. Intuitive focus, factor reallocation and total income. In GE, the tax burden is often shifted away from the initial market and onto the factors of production used intensively in that industry. A. Harberger model of corporate tax incidence. The classic GE approach is the Harberger model, 1962, which analyzes the incidence of a corporate income tax, a tax on capital in the corporate sector, in a two-sector, corporate and non-corporate, two-factor, capital and labor, economy. Initial shock. A tax is placed on capital used in the corporate sector, e.g., manufacturing. Factor reallocation. Capital owners in the corporate sector see their net returns fall and try to move their capital to the untaxed, non-corporate sector, e.g., services, housing. Cross-sectoral effects. The movement of capital depresses the return to capital, R, in the non-corporate sector. The tax effectively reduces the net return to capital everywhere, leading to a decline in the overall return to capital. The tax also changes the mix of factors used across both sectors. The elasticity of factor substitution becomes crucial. If the tax sector is more labor-intensive, the movement of capital elsewhere will affect the relative price of labor, wages, W. Conclusion, Harberger. Harberger famously concluded that the corporate income tax, despite being levied on corporate profits, capital, is largely borne by all capital owners, corporate and non-corporate, across the entire economy, and potentially by labor if the tax sector is labor-intensive. The burden is often shifted far beyond the market where the tax was initially levied. B. Interfactorial versus intrafactorial incidence. GE analysis distinguishes between two types of incidence. Interfactorial incidence, how the burden is distributed between the major factors of production, e.g., between labor and capital. The Harberger model primarily addresses this. Intrafactorial incidence, how the burden is distributed within a factor class, e.g., among high-skilled labor versus low-skilled labor, or between capital owners in different sectors. 3. Comparison and synthesis, PG economic standard, feature. Partial equilibrium, pay, general equilibrium, GE, scope. Single market, e.g., gasoline. All interconnected markets, goods, labor, capital. Key determinant. Elasticities of supply and demand in that specific goods market. Factor mobility, elasticity of factor supply, and elasticity of substitution between factors. Incidence result. Burden is borne by buyers and sellers of the taxed good. Burden is borne by factors of production, labor and capital, in the entire economy. Appropriate for. Excise taxes on small commodities, local taxes. Broad-based taxes, sales taxes, corporate income taxes, payroll taxes. Limitation. Ignores the ultimate source of income, factor returns, and cross-market effects. Requires complex modeling and specific, strong assumptions, e.g., fixed aggregate factor supply, perfect competition.